everyone, and welcome to another tournament review here at PMTT. Tonight, I am joined by Daniel. Daniel, how you going?
Good, thanks, man. How are you?
Yeah, really good, really good. Excited to get to another event this weekend, driving down tomorrow. Um, but rather than me talking about the events that I'm going to, this is the first time I've had Daniel on the channel, and he recently did really well at a Gauntlet event. So I thought I'd get him on here and interview him about kind of how his experience has gone and how he's enjoying it. So Dan, can you give the viewers a quick crash course through how you got into the hobby and kind of what you've been doing with it so far?
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me. I'm the usual. Got into Warhammer at school. One of my close mates, when I was in grade seven, I think, used to bring in white dwarfs to class all of the time, and I remember we started getting good mates, and I went and had a look at some of the books, and he had the one that had the giant Island of Blood battle, where they had like 10,000 points worth of Skaven versus 10,000 points of High Elves.
Hmm.
And that was about the time where I'd also watched Lord of the Rings for the first time and decided Legolas was the coolest thing in the world. So the two of those combined kind of ruined me to be an elf wargamer for the rest of the time. For everyone that knows me, I'm just
There are
as
worse
kind of
things
me as
to
a player.
be. So
Yeah, but yeah, I was always into fantasy. Like when I had to get my mom to drive me to Games Workshop Mount Gravatt, and then everyone kind of like fizzles out towards the end of high school, and then right at that point where trying to go myself, I was so desperate to have someone to play with that my mate Zach, who comes to your events as well, I bought him like a Sylvaneth Christmas box. I was like, please, someone just play Warhammer with me. I think we played two games. He sold it, pissed off to cans for 3 years. And then when he gets to Cairns, he got super into Warhammer to the point where he started going to events. And around that time, the Lumineth came out, and my high elf childhood fantasy was like, okay, you've been collecting Eldar for the last 10 years, and you've played probably 6 games. And I knew he'd come back at some point, so I was like, you know what? I'll spend the next 2 years painting these Lumineth, and then when you get back, we can start playing. And that was earlier this year when I went to contest of fools in Toowoomba. So that was my first big event, which was awesome. And now, what, 6 months later, I've been to four, so it's been really fun.
yeah, no, very nice, very nice. Like getting in, like it sounds like kind of a very stereotypical story. Getting in when you're a
Pretty
kid, liking
normal.
all the models, but not having the funds to do it, and then growing up, becoming an adult, and realize you have fun money, and you can now afford to buy all the cool things you couldn't afford as a kid. So, um,
Yeah, got irresponsible money.
yeah, bit of a call out there for Zach. You bought him an army, and then he just immediately sold it and
It's all right.
bailed out. So,
I think he thinks that me and all my mates split it. I think I had like four mates give me $20, and I covered the other like 100. So there's some news for him. But outside of that,
well, if we ever get him on the channel, we'll have to hear it from his perspective, just to see if there is a bit of a difference of opinion there. Um,
I'm
but
sure there will be.
Speaking of Lumineth and you playing them kind of massively, you took Lumineth to the most recent Gauntlet event, and you did quite well. So, still being kind of fairly new into fourth edition, can you give us just kind of a quick crash course through your list and how you kind of built it and what it was designed to do?
Yeah, of course, man. I all through third, I kind of struggled with like the power fantasy of Lumineth. Like castling didn't really make any sense to me, but I heard online that's how you play Lumineth, so I kept trying to force it. And then through the rest of the community, especially Brad, who we all know, he was like, "Don't read online. What do you like about elves?" And I was like, "I like cavalry and horses." And he's like, "Cool, make that your list." And then the fact that my power fantasy for Lumineth matched up with honestly probably one of the most toxic and unfair lists you can possibly run right now, definitely lined up well. So yeah, man. So right now my list kind of matches up with exactly what makes Lumineth powerful right now.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Give us just a quick kind of rundown of what's in the list, just so that people know what to be on the lookout if they ever see Lumineth across the table.
Yeah, so I've got the twins as my only casters. I've got Severus, who's the biggest asshole in Warhammer. A big reinforced unit of kangaroos. I toyed around with two separate ones, but honestly, a unit of five kangaroos doesn't do anything. Like they need the all-out attack. They need the priority target to do some damage. And so I've got the reinforced unit of kangaroos and General's Reg, 2 units of 5 Dawn Riders. I feel like it's more flexible than 10. The River Blades jumping around, doing all sorts of shenanigans, getting battle tactics. And because just to make the list more horrifically meta, I put Callus and Toll in there because I realized that the list's biggest weakness when it runs around is it doesn't really stick and sit on any objectives. So
Yep.
the fact that you have a 3 up, 4 up deep striker that you can just sit on an objective kind of
Mm.
just fills the massive gap in my list weakness. So
Yep. No, and
yeah,
that's
that's kind of
that's
the idea.
yeah. No, that's exactly how kind of G Dub kind of envisioned people using those regiments of renown, like putting them in your lists to fill a gap and like to fill a hole and kind of round out the list. So no, it sounds like a really fun list. Like it sounds like a really fun list to play and to play against. Like being so flexible, you haven't gone really hard into like you haven't just gone the complete magical dominance or just the shooting or like you haven't lent into any one thing ridiculously, which always is a lot more fun to play against because it's not a case of paper scissors rock. Oh, I my list does well into that style of army. It's okay, cool. This is going to be more of a back and forth game with kind of lots of options for both of us on both sides. So
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoy mid-range Warhammer, like when your army can do a bit of everything. It kind of like has a homage to the old fantasy days a bit more. I say that like I wasn't 10 when I played it, but like I don't like an army where it's like this is the one thing I do. And yeah, sure, I've got that with the wind charges, but I've still like it's still flexible and mid-rangey, and I can fight you, I can shoot you, I can sit on objectives. Like that's kind of a lot more fun and interesting to me. And I feel like at a tournament when you're versing 5 or 3 random players, if you over-index in shooting and then you verse someone that doesn't care about you shooting them, then you're kind of screwed for that game.
yeah, yeah, no, that and that's 100% it. So like if you go a heavy skew list, like I've played really heavy skew lists in the past, and when they work, they're fantastic. When they don't work though, you're losing big every single game. So, and that's where yeah, I'm in complete agreement. It's that kind of mid-range, that kind of average at everything, but you've got options is a lot of fun to play and does well at tournaments. So getting into the tournament, your first opponent was Eric, who was taking a Trog Heavy Gits list on Star Strike. Give us a quick crash course through that game.
Yeah, of course, man. So, me and Eric have been trying to verse each other in Warhammer for quite a while, ever since I got into the Wargamers community. So, we're like, let's just grudge each other. We can finally get that game in. So, Eric's such a nice guy, and honestly, if you ever have him in the room and you need to know a rule, every single rule and every single stat and rule of a war scroll is in his head. Like his brain is built to remember Warhammer rules. But yes, Star Strike against Trolls was difficult because obviously you start the game with one objective,
Mm.
and Trolls are really, really good at sitting on one big objective. I remember from my third game of GoldCon into Brad, I versed Trolls on the Vice. So
Mm.
I know from experience that I'm not going to crack the big block of Trolls on the middle of the game. So he took the turn, teleported all of the he teleported a unit of reinforced trogs onto the center objective, and then auto ran another 3 onto it. And then I was like, cool, 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 cool. I'm not getting a primary for the first 2 turns, so I kind of had to accept I can only get 38 points this game, so
Yep.
I'm gonna try instead of trying to get 50, I'm gonna try and make sure Eric doesn't get 38.
Yep.
And he had like a lot of squigs in his list that he was using for battle tactics. So honestly, for 3 turns, I just ignored his trogs and just went after his squigs and went after his heroes. And by the top of 3, he still had all of his trogs left, but he wasn't getting battle tactics for the rest of the game. So it
Mm.
kind of like it was nice to go into a game being like, I've been in this situation before, and then being able to use the sheer just movement shenanigans of Lumina to try and play around it. Like honestly, I think he walked over to the table at one point, and every single one of my models was on the side of the board. Like nothing was anywhere but the edges, while every single trog was on that middle objective.
Yeah, yeah, and that's how you have to play sometimes. Like if your opponent is really strong at one point, like 9 trogs strong, you either heavily commit and put everything into it, or you just completely ignore it and be elsewhere. So like, yeah, no, that's 100% the way you need to play, and that comes down to kind of what we were talking about earlier with those kind of skew lists. If you skew too hard one way and your opponent knows how to play around that skew, so you very quickly identified that you weren't going to be able to deal with those trogs, so you made sure that you were going to try and outscore him elsewhere. So yeah, no, kudos.
Yeah, it's like, and I feel like that is also part of the power of Lumineth right now. Of like, I'm in complete control of my battle tactics, and I'm in control of whether or not I get onto the objective or not. I might not be able to hit you off it, but if I know I'm going to get all my battle tactics basically because of just the power of them right now, as long as I can just kind of play around your strength for a little bit, I'm probably going to look okay. And I think that's just thanks to the spot that Lumineth's in right now.
Yeah, no, very nice, very nice. So going into round two, you came up against Evie with her Iron Jaws on shifting objectives. How'd that one play
Evie was sad about that because I was actually using her models against her. My the list I'm running right now is like I'm practicing it ready for Runax, and I didn't want to paint up a fox and five kangaroos and realize I didn't like it. So she very nicely lended me one of her foxes and her amazing fox kangaroo conversions that we've all seen and voted for as best army.
Yep.
So using those against her with her cabbage heavy list, um, honestly, it just came down to the prior role that not the prior role. Sorry, I got to take first, and I really got to not flex, but just use the power of the wind list right now, where I actually turn one, slay the entourage, her Kragnos, ran up every the reinforced kangaroos and the two foxes up into Kragnos's face, shot him, and then went back to my deployment as if I'd never been there, and he just fell over. Like it was a bit of lucky rolling, a bit of unlucky rolling, but it was just not a very. I it was big props to Evie for staying positive, keeping the game because that was not a nice way for that game to start.
Mm, yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's what it comes down to. Sometimes, like if you go for the slightly risky play early, and if it pulls off, oh boy, are you in a great position. But if it fails, especially with a list like yours, where you can just kind of reset your entire deployment, where you've just done all this damage, even if you don't kill him, you don't care. You're still in your deployment zone, still plenty far away from them, so it's still work for them to get to you. So, how did the rest of the game play out after that, or was it just playing keep away with cabbages?
It was playing keep away with cabbages. You're 100% right. Like there's no real risk in running up on Kragnos and shooting the hell out of him because I get to go back to my deployment and kind of reset. I was just lucky that I killed him, and then yeah, it was just stay as far away from cabbages as possible. Evie did a great job getting points. Like she was ahead of me on points, which meant that I was getting extra CP, which I think is a bit of a interesting spot for fourth right now. I know about your games, but I very often find I'm ahead in board presence and strength, but I've got the extra CP from being the underdog. I don't know if that's been happening to you a lot recently as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting to kind of see it. I've found a lot of my games are going short, and the ones that I'm planning to play out 5 turns and deliberately underscoring often comes back to bite me. So
Oh, really?
yeah, that's my games. So I'm usually going hard from the get go, but that's also how my list is built to go in hard and attrition early and try and play it that way. So
Yeah, but yeah, the rest of the game, it was kind of stay away from cabbages and shoot them, and just there was some unlucky charges coming out, and I managed to have killed all the cabbages by the top of three, so it was kind of just it was a rough game to be honest. It was a rough game.
yeah, yeah. So going into round three, still undefeated. You came up against Nathan and his Stormcast on the Vice. How did that one play out?
I was really, really excited for that game because that was a rematch from GoldCon. And when we versed each other in GoldCon, I was playing a much more mid-rangey list that had one fox, five kangaroos. So it was a versus he was playing his exact same army with the Karazai and Krondys and the long strikes bouncing around. And is it the Praetors that give the honor guard ward
Yeah,
to the
the
dragons?
big unit of Praetors. Yep.
Yeah, and so he brought the exact same list, and I was like, I'm always happy when I burst the same list again
Mm.
because like I feel like that's when you really get to work out the next game, because I've got a bad habit of not knowing what my opponent's lists do, which is the nice part of fourth. Of it's a lot easier to know what your opponent's list does.
Yep.
But it was awesome to run it back and yeah, tried to do to Karazai what I did to not Crondis, sorry, Cradnor. Ran up on him, didn't kill him, but definitely I think put the fear into Nathan about that I could do that to Karazai.
Mm.
And very quickly, the game kind of shifted to vertically running across the board,
Yeah. Okay.
and we're just kind of both staying away from each other a bit. And I from the last game of GoldCon, I knew not new, but I was like, all right, I'm not going to go for the big two scary dragons because goddamn are long strikes scarier than dragons.
Yep.
I don't know if you've had to verse them much yet.
I've played Nathan a couple times with that exact same list, so yes, I am well aware of how much damage a full unit of Lawn Strikes can do.
So the second I was like, all right, I'm going to put the fear in him with the dragons, pivot around and just wait for those long strikes to arrive, and then just throw my entire army at them because from there I'm looking okay, which is luckily what I got to do. But then I did not. It took me a long time to kill the other dragons, and he was ahead on points for a long, long time. But when we kind of set it up on for the vice at the end, he was down to one dragon. I had so much stuff running around just because it's the Luma. The list is just really, really fast.
Yep. Yeah, so you can really kind of threaten all those angles, and especially those missions like the Vice, where it is really spread out. So if you can get a bit of an attrition advantage early, you can really spread your army out, take all the points, and really get people on the back foot.
Yeah, especially when you can fly a fox 42 inches across the board to go grab the projective you accidentally left off.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. So, but
But
yeah,
now that was a really, really fun game. With him and I both the whole time were like, this is probably the nicest and happiest top table that you could see at an event.
yeah, no, that's awesome. That is awesome. So, you ended up going undefeated, which is a fantastic achievement. There's definitely
Thank you.
some definite sharks in the southeast Queensland tank at the moment. You got a third for your efforts. So Chase took first with his Slaves to Darkness. Brad got second with his Trogs, and then you got third. Um, Scott Wyatt took out Best Painted with his Squigs Enge, but you also got Best Sports, which is a huge achievement and is made even more impressive by the fact that you beat all your opponents. So you got max points. Every opponent said you were their favorite game. So that's the
Oh,
other
no,
reason.
no, awesome.
Yeah, that's the other reason I have Daniel on tonight. Not that he played three fantastic games, but that he was able to win three games, but win in such a way that his opponents thought that that was the most fun they'd had that day, which is an insane achievement. Um, so this is where I'm kind of going to kind of like actually start quizzing you and questioning you properly. What do you think added to kind of everyone's enjoyment for the day? Like, what strategies do you use to kind of make sure both people have a good time?
Um, Honestly, man, I just think that whether you're playing for fun or whether you're playing competitively, like I feel like when it like in all things you do, whether it's like sport or board games, like anytime there's some sort of like competitiveness to it, like video games and all that, if you're having fun, you're probably playing better. Like if you're
Mm.
stressed or you're upset or angry, you're going to start making mistakes. I know I make a lot of mistakes the second I get stressed. So it's an active effort of if I can keep the game fun, if I can make sure we're having a relaxed game, both of us are going to play better and that'll make us both have a better game. So it kind of like wins in both categories at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So really focusing on the having fun first, trying to do well second. So like almost just consciously making that decision to take the pressure off and focus on enjoying the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just getting off on the right strong foot. Like at the start of my games, Brad gets mad at me all the time because he tells me that I try to give too much away. But I I just want to start on the right foot. So like when I always find when an opponent tells me what their army does, they'll start listing rules. And then it's kind of on me to put together what makes that good. And honestly, I'm just not good at that. Like if you tell me that Praetors have a 5-up, if they can give something a 5-up ward, I won't make the connection that you'll probably put that on Quandus and sit mid board with it. Like,
Hmm.
so I actively tell my, I don't only, not only do I tell my opponent the rules, I try to tell my opponent why I think my list is good,
Yeah. Okay.
because that kind of like, obviously you tell them, I try to tell them the gotcha straight away. There's nothing
Yep.
worse than accidentally gotchaing your opponent. And I can't even imagine people that actively gotcha them because I feel
Hmm.
bad enough when I accidentally do it. But I just feel like if I tell my opponent, this is why this is my list, I think it's good at this, your opponent can start thinking about, oh, well, maybe I can play around. Like you're both, before the game's even started, they're already thinking about how to counter your list. And it just makes your game, both of you play better because you're both playing around each other and have a better understanding of your opponent's list. Because I feel like if you do that, what I've found every time, because the people in our community do great. If I tell you some that much level detail to my army, you're going to tell me the same, and that's why my
Hmm.
games always start like 30 minutes in.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree with a lot of that. So like, I personally don't go into an insane level of detail when I tell people about my list, but like I always make a point to, this is everything my list does. These are the gotchas. They are a separate little category, for lack of a better term, at the end that I explain. Like, this is a gotcha. This is what I'm going to try and do with it. If I pull it off, you're going to feel really bad. This is the gotcha.
Yeah.
Don't let me do this. Um, but yeah, that's
You also
interesting.
don't feel good.
You
Sorry,
go.
man.
You go.
You don't feel good gotching your opponent if you didn't tell them.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas if you can play around it and set it up in such a way that they can't do anything about it, that feels good because that's a reflection on player skill and like you know that they're trying to stop that, so you feel really good when you get to pull it off. If you get to just surprise them with a rule that they had no chance of knowing, then it's not really that much player skill. It's just kind of, oh,
Yeah.
they're now not going to forget that next time. Whereas you could have
Yeah,
completely
exactly.
skipped that first bad experience they have with it. So,
Yeah, so that's kind of like step one in how I try and like I want to make sure that we both are playing with as much information as possible as much as each other, just so that we both have a fun game, we both had a better game, and yeah, it just gets rid of any chances of a gotcha.
yeah, no, no, that is fantastic, and I definitely feel like there's not many gotchas in fourth ed, but the ones that do exist are brutal if you're not prepared for
Yes,
them. So,
yes, 100%. Um, I've had some iron jaws pile into me. I've had some corn pile into me that I didn't realize. So yeah, it definitely makes it hard.
yeah, yeah. Well, I've caught one person out. He was a good friend, and I was doing it just to tease him a bit. But I've caught one person out with Belthanos's teleport, which is huge, and he was completely caught unawares, and it completely swung the game. Um,
It's a big model to teleport as well.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, the only reason I did that was because I was like, oh, do you want me to go through my list? He's like, no, I learned through the game better. I was like, okay, you're gonna learn
All
some
right, I'll
stuff.
show you.
But
You're gonna learn by doing.
yep, but I can confidently say, we've played again, and he was not caught out by that the second time.
Oh,
Yep.
absolutely. The best way to the best way to learn sometimes is don't take a take back. Don't like just suck up your mistake because you'll definitely remember to never let Belthanos teleport again if you can help it.
Yep, yeah, and I learned the same way. You just if you make a mistake, you wear it. Okay, move on. You're never going to forget it and do it again. So no one will make fun of you for making a mistake. Your friends are allowed to make fun of you if you make the same mistake twice, though. Is my kind of rule.
Yes,
So
of course.
yeah,
That's what they're friends for.
yeah, yeah. Well, fantastic achievement. Going undefeated and getting best sports is absolutely insane. I'm struggling to actually think of anyone else who has achieved that at one of my events. I think someone achieved it in the first Gauntlet, but I think that event was only like 10 players or something. So definitely a huge
Oh,
achievement
I
to
appreciate it.
achieve it.
I'll definitely take it.
Yeah, no, well deserved from what I saw as well. So it looked like you played three excellent games, and you're an
Right.
absolute gentleman
Yeah.
on all three of them. So
Thank you. Thank you.
and so yeah, the next round of the Gauntlet is in a couple of weeks' time, and will be at IF. Did you manage to snag a ticket to that one?
I am busy that weekend,
Ah,
sadly, but I'm doing my best to make sure I'm ready. Is it four? There's a fourth one, hey?
yes, the fourth one will be at
Yes.
T3 in November.
Yeah, T3. I'm definitely trying to make sure I'm good for T3, but I can't do the third one, sadly.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, no, that is good. It looks like we've had a really good turnout so far, and we've sold out the next event, which is awesome. But there are still a couple of tickets available for T3. If any of the viewers are free that weekend, you can find all the details on the website. Um, Other than that, that's pretty much all the questions that I had for you. Did you want to kind of give any shout outs or call out anyone in the community?
Yeah, honestly, like my three opponents that I versed, like I understand that my list is probably a little not toxic, but it's mean and it lets me kind of have the agency of the game. So it says a lot about them to like vote for me as their favorite opponent. Like it's not just my achievement. Like it says a lot about my opponents as well. So I do very much appreciate that as well.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Like, and I know the Southeast Queensland community has really worked over the past couple of years, definitely from a TO's perspective, really worked on kind of building the community and the camaraderie of the local scene. And we're seeing it reflected in the sports votes, where majority of tournaments, most people are getting at least one. There are
Yeah, that's
kind of
awesome.
there's very few players that are walking away with zero, and usually it's a case of they're a nice enough person, but they're running a really skew list, and it's the army that's the negative play experience, not the person.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but the
I
other thing,
definitely want to shout out Brad as well. Like at Gauntlet, not Gauntlet, sorry, at Contest of Fools in round. He was my opponent in round one. So up until that point, the only people I'd ever versed in a game of Warhammer was like my very close friends that I've known for ever since like I was in school. So I honestly lucked out that probably the nicest and most inviting person in the Southeast Queensland community was the person I came across first because thanks to that game and your event, he's the reason why me and my mate Zach are like in a part of this community. So I very much appreciate him for that.
very big shout out there. So, Brad, you better be watching to be able to accept that huge praise. So, but we will leave it there. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see if Daniel comes back on the channel. He's set a pretty high bar for himself now. So he's got to achieve some big things if he wants to come back on. But you've been a lovely
I'll do my
guest, man.
best.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll see everyone next time. Bye.
Thank you, man. Bye.